Hello and welcome back to Timely Topics podcast series. I'm Mary Kamp, Chief Clinical Officer with RehabCare. And with me today is John Dwyer and Liz Barlow. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Mary.
Great to be here with you both.
This new payment model pushes payment away from quantity of services and promotes payment based on patient characteristics. So we're continuing our movement away from volume-based payments and more towards value-based purchasing. So let's get into the clinical and financial impacts of the final rule. Let's tackle the clinical changes first. Liz, what are your thoughts?
Well, PDPM has been quite a journey. CMS released an advance notice last year called RCS-1. Then they released the proposed rule in April of this year called the Patient-Driven Payment Model. They received over 200 comments regarding the payment change for SNFs. So it took them a few months to go through these comments, and now the new payment model will go into effect on October 1st, 2019, and will replace the current RUGS 4 model.
Are the components of the final rule as we expected them to be, John?
Actually, yes. There are really no surprises in the final rule, and I think it makes sense for us to jump into the payment categories. There are 5 major case mix groups in the final rule, and 1 non-case mix group. They are physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech-language pathology, skilled nursing services, non-therapy ancillary, non-case mix.
Thanks, John. Let's talk about the interim payment assessments and the changes there.
Sure, Mary. One of the key changes between the proposed rule and the final rule are the IPAs. This assessment will now be made optional by the facility. CMS references this on page 231 of the final rule. Because the IPA will be optional and providers can determine their own criteria for when an IPA is completed, we are revising the ARD criteria we proposed. The ARD for the IPA will be the date the facility chooses to complete the assessment relative to the triggering event that causes a facility to choose to complete the IPA. Payment based on the IPA will begin the same day as the ARD.
So that means the IPA will not be susceptible to assessment penalties given the optional nature of the assessment?
Yes, CMS expects facilities to complete IPAs as they deem necessary to address clinical changes throughout a SNF stay. The removal of the requirement to complete these assessments does not in any way negate the need to provide excellent skilled nursing and rehab care and continually monitor and document patient status. That's what the rule states.
Well, that's interesting. Thanks, Liz. Let's keep it going with some of the other clinical changes in the final rule. Could you review those with us?
Sure. One clinical change is the inpatient surgical procedures. The final rule verified that clinical categories will be determined through diagnosis coding in Section I-8000. CMS also clarified on the recent Open Door Forum that the diagnosis recorded here is the primary reason for the SNF admission, not necessarily the reason for admission to the hospital. Some ICD-10 codes will map to several clinical categories based on whether or not a patient had a surgical procedure. After feedback from stakeholders, CMS clarified that surgical procedures that occurred during the preceding hospital stay will now be coded through an updated section, J2000 on the MDS. Assessors will be able to capture those procedures through a checkbox-style mechanism.
Obviously, that doesn't change the impact of the SNFs because they don't handle inpatient surgical procedures, but understanding how to code these procedures and capturing them on the MDS will be vital. What other changes will impact the SNFs?
Section O. CMS has been clear that they will continue to track therapy minutes with PDPM. While CMS did not change the instructions in the final rule on reporting Section O, they did clarify the look-back period. During the SNF Open Door Forum on August 2nd, John Kane announced the look-back period for therapy minutes would be the entire stay. This is referenced in page 143 of the final rule. The next area that affects SNFs is concurrent and group therapy. The proposed rule placed a cap on concurrent and group minutes provided by therapy at 25%. While no changes were made to this ruling, CMS did clarify on the ODF that this cap would be placed on per patient, per discipline. They anticipate the majority of minutes to be individual treatments. CMS will be tracking these minutes as well through Section O. A facility will receive a non-fatal warning edit on the validation report after submission if minutes exceed the capitated amount.
Thanks, Liz. You're right. There aren't really any surprises in the final rule, which means our team was tracking PDPM thoroughly and accurately the whole way through. So that's great. John, I wonder if you can provide some insights into what PDPM could mean from a financial standpoint.
I can, with the caveat that we did a very high-level financial analysis for our provider clients. And what we've seen so far is that our provider clients will come out on the positive side. But again, this is very early and it can't be guaranteed at this point. It also means that we've been working very closely in our partnerships with clients to help ensure a smooth transition. We work very hard to ensure they're as prepared as possible. And we're feeling very good about the financial impact for our client partners.
Many thanks, John. That sounds promising. I also think it emphasizes the importance of working with the right partner through big changes like PDPM. In fact, we have another podcast episode that talks to providers about how to best prepare for October 1st, 2019. Our audience can view those by subscribing to our Timely Topics series on iTunes, and we'll provide a link at the end of this episode for people to receive our podcasts directly to their inboxes. Thanks to Liz Barlow and John Dwyer for joining me today and discussing the clinical and financial impacts of PDPM. Be sure to join us next time for another Timely Topic episode.